classroom assignments. And then we're going to actually spend the last half doing some idea generation for both programs and classroom instruction. We'll do some sharing, and this is going to lead to a collective creation of a resource that we can all come back to on this topic. So we will be doing something in the second half that's collaborative. So here is a link. It's on the slide, and then Mackenzie, if you're able to put it in the chat, and I'm going to open the chat now to that resource. We will be building on that link today, and so this is something that you can use after. Thank you, Mackenzie. So more on that later. There will be a print version of this guide as well of everything that we created today, but Mackenzie will talk about that a little bit later. So I am Kimberly Shotick, currently the Student Success Librarian at Northern Illinois University, which is in DeKalb. But again, a lot of what I'm talking about today is work that I did when I was at a STEM-focused private institution in Chicago. And this is Mackenzie.
Hi, everyone. I'm Mackenzie Salisbury. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm at the School of the Art Institute. I'm the information literacy librarian. And while I'm at an art and design school, I think we're hoping that everyone can use some mental flexibility in thinking about how these might transition into other disciplines as well.
Great, thank you. So our goal in this presentation is to collectively come up with ideas on how we can engage students in teaching and programming in ways that we can help them disrupt the traditional systems of knowledge production. So what do we mean by traditional systems of knowledge production? Kind of the gold standard that we think about in research is those published peer-reviewed journals or books. This is generally done by folks in positions of privilege, and often they have homogeneous identities. So other voices are left out. We want to challenge that because, obviously we, and I think in this profession, increasingly find that problematic. So for example, even before COVID-19 decimated the research output of female scholars, research has shown that despite gains, we are nowhere near gender parity in publishing, especially when it comes to STEM specialties. There's just not, that parity is not going to happen until the next century. And things are getting worse because of the structural problems that we have in our society that create roadblocks, potholes, and dead ends for women, LGBTQ individuals, and BIPOC communities. So these biases and structural issues impact us at all stages. What happens then when we value those traditional publications in academia? Well, it's complicated because we as librarians are sort of the middle person between those information sources and the students. So we are actually in the middle, we're stuck in the middle. And how do we kind of contribute to these problems? Well, professors have journal lists that they distribute to students, and their own tenure requirements and even our own tenure requirements might perpetuate the valuing of these venues that are dominated by these voices, and kind of further exacerbate these issues. Our subscriptions value them. We reinforce this value in the instruction that we do. So what are we to do about all of that? I was really excited by Dr. Saunders' keynote this morning, and by the mention of the seventh frame that she's recommended. And I hope and I think that this presentation kind of fits into that seventh frame. Though we created this presentation riffing off of the current framework as it is now. And actually this presentation was supposed to be given last year, but that, we were pushed to this year because of the pandemic. But these things are still very relevant, if not more relevant than ever before. In 2019 at ACRL, Mackenzie and I hosted a roundtable to discuss these issues and to devise meaningful interactions with students that enable them to see themselves as contributors to scholarship rather than only consumers of it. So that's from the framework. to cultivate the student's critical disposition toward authority and knowledge production, and to enable students to participate in content creation as a mode of resistance towards current problems in scholarly production. So we hosted this roundtable to have a conversation about what were librarians doing about these issues. And I admit that these goals are really lofty, right? Like we're not going to do all of this in a one-shot session. But what we hope to do is to share some of those ideas that we talked about in that roundtable, but then to build on it here with you. So I'm going to start by offering a few examples that came out of that roundtable discussion. I'll give an example from my previous institution, and then Mackenzie will give an example from her institution. So again, this came from the roundtable discussion. The first example was about a research guide that was on the Dakota Access Pipeline. This librarian created this research guide valuing the perspectives from Native peoples. So the publications that are linked in this guide, and you can Google that guide and find it, are actually, the authors are Native peoples in the communities that were affected by the Dakota Access Pipeline. So framing it, the authority in the people that were being impacted. Another example was at the library at the University of Albany. They ran and continue to run a legal workshop using the Indian Child Welfare Act of 1978 as their example for the legal workshop on how to do legal research. So in this workshop, participants used the library and the government resources to conduct legal research. And through the course of examining these legal documents, participants learn how legal documents can actually create barriers to access to information that impact communities. Those communities that are impacted rely on translations of legal jargon, and those translations filter the information through their own biases. So in this example, the Indian Child Welfare Act was meant to give jurisdiction over child welfare cases to tribal governments, but this information was being sort of filtered by these mainstream publications that took the side of this white Christian perspective, favoring Christian families who sought to adopt Native Indian children. So, through this legal workshop, they were able to kind of expose some of these complexities and talk about information privilege and authority in those ways. So these examples give students an opportunity to reconsider authority and to challenge their roles as consumers and creators of information. Another example from my own work is a Wikipedia Editathon. I think this is something that a lot of libraries have been engaged in, but if your library hasn't, it is an editathon is a scheduled time where people edit Wikipedia together, offline or online, or sometimes both, and it's typically focused on a specific topic. So that picture was from Illinois Institute of Technology, and that was an editathon that we ran a few years ago. And in the events that I did at Illinois Institute of Technology focused on women in STEM, because, as that previous research showed, there's not parity in the publishing specifically in those fields, that there's such a gap there. And Wikipedia articles about women, as you probably know, are much less likely to be included, expanded on, neutral, or detailed. A 2015 report found that the pages on females tended to be more linked to men. So talking about women's relationships to men, them as daughters, them as wives, language that was sexist, loaded, or otherwise gendered. So clearly, there's a lot of work to be done on women in Wikipedia. This is an opportunity to talk about systematic bias in knowledge production when you host these events. It's also an opportunity to teach students that they have the ability to contribute to the most used reference resource in the world. And if that's something that you haven't done, I have good news for you. It's very easy to do. And I really recommend, and I hope that everyone after this session will go and try it out for themselves. You just can go to a Wikipedia page, click edit, and change it to visual editor if it's not on that. Then it's just like editing a Word document. It really is that easy to edit a page. Of course, that's an oversimplification because, you know, whether or not things get accepted and kind of the pillars of Wikipedia, there is a lot to understand and unpack there. But the actual editing of a page is not very difficult. So I'm not going to go over this today, but in the guide that Mackenzie has linked out to there, under programming in the programming folder is this hosting a Wikipedia Editathon in an academic library document. This is every step that I go through to host an event. It includes how much time it takes, the different resources that I use. It even includes the text that I use to send to professors to ask them to, you know, offer extra credit to their students for attending these events. So all of that promotional piece is in there. And I'd be happy to talk to anybody more about hosting events. But I think that hosting Wikipedia editathons and contextualizing these ideas of information, authority, and all of the issues that are problematic in the knowledge production is a really good opportunity for our students and even for our faculty as well. Okay, so I'm going to turn it over to Mackenzie now, who's going to talk about an event that she runs at the School of the Art Institute.
Thanks so much, Kimberly. And yeah, I want to echo the Wikipedia Editathons. There's a very famous one called Art and Feminism that happens every year. I know it's part of Kimberly's guide, so definitely check that out. So that's like a program that Kimberly was speaking about, and I'm going to kind of shift gears a little bit and talk about an instruction session that I've done where students are really centered as content creators. So the first thing to know is that I do work at an art and design school, so things are a little bit different. But as part of art and design, we have a really unique curriculum that includes 4 courses that make up what we call our academic spine. And so while the library does work with all levels of the spine, this particular assignment is really focused on professional practices, which is the junior or 3rd year course that students are going to use. So there's some expectation that they already know kind of the basic intro level, how to use the library, search databases, those kinds of things. So this is kind of a scaffolded approach to adding on to what they've already learned. So for this particular assignment, I've called it Place Your Work 2.0, and it aligns with the course learning goal for professional practices, where they're asking students to demonstrate the ability to think, speak, and write clearly and effectively with regards to creative and/or scholarly practice. And so a lot of times this takes the form of an artist statement or something like that. I do want to give a huge shout out. I think none of us make work or create lesson plans in a vacuum, and I'm certainly among those people. Both Robert Heichman and Larissa Garcia, who I know is somewhere at the InfoLit Summit today, super inspired this particular lesson plan, and so I want to make sure to give them kind of the proper shout outs. And I think when I've seen Larissa present on this particular topic or lesson plan previously, she's used this quote, which I think is really helpful, and from Kendall. But I think for my purposes and when I'm talking to students, I really try to emphasize that they should worry less about being original and more about being informed. And I think that especially in an art context, people are very concerned about being original, but I think that this can happen in all kind of levels of scholarship, especially when you're talking to grad students or people that are doing kind of deeper research. So what does this look like? So it starts off with a class visit, and we talk about exhibition catalogs. So these are a really unique kind of information. They kind of are situated somewhere between a document of a specific event, but they also usually have essays and other accompanying material. So it plays a really unique role specifically within our education, but it's helpful for us to start here because we're able to kind of center the conversation around some of these questions about how are they made, what goes into making these kinds of books, what purpose do they serve, who's the intended audience of this material, and what makes them successful or not. It's also a huge part of our library. Our library is very small. I think we are at about 130,000 volumes, and I would say at least 2/3 of that would be considered some kind of exhibition catalog. So it's a huge amount of our materials. So it's helpful for them to also know kind of what it is they're looking at when they're browsing around the shelves. So this particular assignment is broken down into 3 parts, and it usually spans between 2 to 3 weeks, and it includes both library visits, but also work kind of on their own within their classrooms. So the very first piece is that students are asked to identify 3 to 5 exhibition, or I say similar publications because we have some weird outliers that would probably count, but these publications that they think that their work would fit into or respond to. We really ask them to have more than one artist because we don't want them to just be like, oh, I like this artist, I want to put my work in their exhibition catalog. And so from that, we have them kind of pick 3 to 5, they have a conversation with their faculty, and then they select one and conduct much deeper research, which includes reflection and research using the following prompts. So what is the theme or the thesis of the exhibition? In what ways will your work fit into the framework? If you have an affinity for the artist, is that included? And then what have you learned from your research? So this is trying to get at both them doing more kind of like intense research, but also getting them to start writing and really situating themselves in relationship to these other people. So after they select their first one and they do some writing, they move on to the second piece, which is the making part, which is always very exciting for students. So what we ask them to do is to create 2 pages that in library lingo is kind of like a faux tip-in. So the pages physically mimic the rest of the exhibition catalog in size. We talk about paper quality, we talk about typography, but the content on the pages is what's most important, right? So on one page, it includes a short bio and the artist statement that they've been working on, and as well as the writing based on the prompts from the previous slide, and then also the references and citations for 2 outside sources. And we're pretty liberal with the sources that they can use. This is something that the faculty member and I both vet as they're going through this process. And we definitely try to encourage alternative forms of information, so artist interviews, some blog posts, depending, other art critics, those kinds of things. And then of course, you know, regular scholarship is not frowned upon, but we don't make it exclusively, it doesn't have to exclusively be like peer reviewed or anything like that. And then the second page includes an image of their work in the same style as the others. And so this is also part of their class as they're learning how to document their work. And so it's an opportunity for them to really try that out as well. So the last piece of this assignment is that they then come into the library and they kind of present this work as a class. And so they have to kind of get up in front of everyone and explain the process. They answer a couple of questions. The one that I find most interesting is the sequencing question. So why they're selecting to place their work where they are within this exhibition, really getting them to think critically about sequencing both as an art form, but how information flows is really great. And then also, what did they discover during the research that was unexpected? A lot of what we encourage at my institution is curiosity and exploration, which fits very well with the framework. And so this is a really great opportunity for them to kind of say something that challenged them, that was unexpected as they were doing searching. And then the final piece of part 3 is they actually physically put these pages in the book. We don't use adhesive or anything, so don't worry. And then they actually put them back on the shelf so that in theory, the next person that pulls it off the shelf will maybe know that it's somebody else's work, but maybe not. And so there's an ambiguity that kind of lives in that, which is kind of fun. So what does this look like? Here are just a couple of examples. So this was from a class or a student who was really interested in design. So they put their work in here, again, mimicking the page size, the typography. I think the student actually did a really, really nice job in terms of like paper quality and all of that. Some students chose to do something that was a little bit more in conversation with the other art. So this person printed their entire, or I should say both pages on vellum. So it's actually a transparency. So when you're flipping through, it's definitely different, but It also is kind of absorbing the information that's on either side of it, which was really interesting, and fit really well with this particular student's work, which was really nice. And then here's just a couple of more examples. So all in all, it's been really successful. I've done this 3 or 4 years running. We didn't figure out a good way to do this digitally, though I will say some of them have been so successful that one in particular, a student made a page and somebody in the library found the book and brought it to the front desk, and the library staff thought it actually belonged in the book, and so they sent it off to be bound. And so now we have this book and there are 2 pages that are bound in the back of it. That's how convincing it was, which I thought was really great. My dean was not as thrilled, but I think it was a really good testament to the amount of work they did, and it was a nice kind of moment of disruption that I think we're all excited about. And then lastly, I would say too, like, this is all great for libraries. I think there's a lot of really small information literacy moments that happen here, but it also is like part of a larger movement in art. Art as disruption is not new. Things such as like guerrilla flyering or marketing is like very common, and also other forms of protest art. I feel like this kind of situates itself somewhere in between all of that. So now what, right? So like we've given you a couple of examples of ways that we think that we can start to have students disrupt knowledge production. And so what we're going to do at this point is we're going to go into breakout rooms, but before we do that, we're going to be using a platform called Murrow. I don't know if anyone is familiar with it or not. I'm going to stop sharing for a second and then I will reshare and I'll give you a little demonstration before we kind of throw you all in there. So let me. All right. Can everyone see this? Thumbs up, hopefully. So
Yes.
thank you. So Murrow is a collaborative online whiteboard, and there are some really great things about it. I use this in instruction all of the time in the pandemic times. The most important thing to know is, one, you don't need a login. So those links will work kind of in the same way like that a Google Doc works, where you can just like sign in, or you don't even have to sign in, you just click the link and you'll come in here. But it also edits live. And so anytime you're making changes to this, whoever is on the board can make changes. So also there's a little bit of like Prezi in here for those of you that remember Prezi. I feel like they missed their moment somehow. So this is like an infinite board. You can scroll in and out or zoom in and out. But I wanted to demonstrate just really quickly the 2 ways that, and you can all play around with this as much as you want, but the things that we're hoping to use this for is adding, essentially, when you all are generating ideas, you can add to these boards. So the first thing is, if there are already little sticky notes here, you want to make sure you have the arrow on your mouse instead of the hand. If you have the hand, it's just going to move you around. So make sure you have the little mouse pointer, and then you can just double click on any of these and you can type. So hello world, for instance. You can change the font and all that up here if you want. And then if you want to add new sticky notes, this toolbar that is kind of flush left over here, if you hover over the one with a little that's like earmarked, whatever, can click on that and you can choose your color, and then you can smack it down there and say hello again. Perfect. So really those are the 2 that I wanted to point out. This is pretty intuitive, so once you get the hang of it, I think you will all be excited about it. I'm excited about it. And we've included just some kind of like framing questions, so you don't feel like you're starting with nothing. And these are all things that I think we are hoping you all can have some really rich conversations around. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to put the breakout links in the chat, and I should say too, oh, I should go back. One moment, please. Nope. I'm gonna put these in the chat to everyone, and then
So we're going to actually have some breakout rooms within we're not in Blackboard. Oh my gosh, you can tell I've been teaching within Zoom, and you will select the proper room based on how many vowels are in your first name. So if you have 0 to 1, you're going to self-select room 1, 2 vowels, room 2, 3 vowels, room 4 or 3, 4 or more, you'll self-select room 4. And let's see, we are having those breakout rooms created now.
Yeah, and for those of you, if you don't get a prompt to enter the breakout room, you should be able to just click the breakout room button with those 4 tiles, and then you should be able to enter. If you don't, let us know, and I think Jill or Ken can help us out. And we'll also be kind of popping into the rooms just to see how everyone is doing. And then at the end, we're going to come back and kind of share out if there were exciting things. So we're going to spend about 7 minutes doing this, because I know we're short on time. So yeah, so it'll be
So
quick.
If you click on breakout rooms, you should see room 1, 2, 3, and 4. Join the room. Either you don't have to join a room. If you're really like, come on, really, you don't have to. That's okay. But we hope that you do, and you'll have some conversation with the people in your room and contribute to the board. There is a giveaway at the end that Mackenzie will tell you about. So if you are able to contribute and stay to the end, we have some goodies that we're actually going to mail to your house. So that's kind of exciting.
Yeah. So we'll see you all in a couple minutes.
Welcome back. Sorry for that cut off there.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much. Sorry for the abrupt transition. We were going to come back and share out, but we're out of time. What I did want to mention is that I put in the chat information, but like Kimberly had mentioned at the beginning, I'm going to do a lottery. So originally we were going to make books in person, but since that's not possible, if you want, you can enter your name and address, and I will choose 10 people to send handmade books to that kind of include ideas that were generated today. You all can feel free to go back to those Murrow boards, add things from this session or other sessions if you're interested in doing that. And if anyone has questions about Murrow too, it's a really great teaching tool. Feel free to reach out to me. But the link is in the chat for the lottery. And if anybody has other questions, let us know. You can always email us. And I know that the InfoLit Summit people are going to link out to the recording and all of that stuff later on. So if anybody, I can reshare the link right now. Does anybody else have questions before we